Blood is thicker than water, but it's also a hell of a lot harder to wash out of a white dress. My sister tried to drown my wedding day in a sea of fake grief, banking on my family's endless capacity to coddle her. So, I gave her the spotlight she craved. I just changed the script. You don't wake up one day and realize your sister is a narcissist. It's not a sudden revelation. It's a slow, creeping erosion of your own reality, measured out in ruined birthdays, hijacked holidays, and quiet car rides home where your parents tell you to just be the bigger person. My name is Emily. For 28 years, I was the bigger person. My younger sister, Sabrina, was the center of the universe. Sabrina wasn't a cartoon villain. She was far more dangerous. She was beautiful, fragile, and armed with an uncanny radar for whenever someone else was about to experience joy. If I won a spelling bee in 5th grade, Sabrina developed a mysterious migraine that required my mother to sit in a dark room with her all night. When I graduated college with honors, Sabrina went through a devastating, tear-soaked breakup the morning of the ceremony, ensuring my father spent the entire commencement texting her from the bleachers. My parents, Brenda and Tom, weren't evil. They were just hostages who had fallen in love with their captor. To them, Sabrina was a delicate flower requiring constant cultivation. I was the dirt. I was reliable, sturdy, and entirely meant to be stepped on so she could bloom. Then came Liam. Liam didn't marry into a family. He married into a hostage situation. He's a structural engineer, a man who understands foundations and load-bearing walls. Within 6 months of dating, he looked at my family dynamic and calmly stated, "Your sister is structurally unsound, and your parents are building their house on a sinkhole." He was the first person to ever validate my exhaustion. He didn't tell me to be the bigger person. He told me I was allowed to be angry. We got engaged on a Tuesday in October. No fanfare. Just the two of us on our couch, rain beating against the windows, eating takeout Thai food. It was quiet. It was perfect. It was entirely ours. The mistake we made was taking it public. My parents threw us an engagement party a month later at a mid-tier Italian restaurant in the suburbs. About 40 people. Friends, aunts, uncles, cousins. I was wearing a simple navy dress, sipping Prosecco, actually believing for a fleeting, foolish second that I could just be a bride. An hour into the dinner, Liam stood up to give a toast. He thanked everyone for coming, looked at me with an expression that made the chaotic noise of the room fade away, and raised his glass. Before the crystal even chimed, the sound of metal clinking against glass cut through the air. Sabrina was standing at the end of the table. She was wearing a pale pink wrap dress that managed to look both angelic and vaguely bridal. She had a fork in one hand and her water goblet in the other. "I know tonight is about Emily and Liam," she started, her voice trembling with just the right amount of practiced emotion. "But seeing two people commit to building a family, well, it just feels like the right time to share that our family is growing too." She placed a flat, perfectly manicured hand over her completely flat stomach. "I'm pregnant." The room inhaled, a collective, oxygen-stealing gasp. I watched the exact moment my engagement died. It took less than 3 seconds. My mother, Brenda, knocked over her own wine glass in her haste to get out of her chair. She sprinted to Sabrina, sobbing, wrapping her in a fierce embrace. My father followed, burying his face in Sabrina's hair. "A baby," my mother wept, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "My baby is having a baby." I stood there, my glass still half raised. Liam's hand found the small of my back. His fingers dug in, anchoring me to the floor before I could float away into the familiar void of irrelevance. I didn't say a word. I just drank my Prosecco. From that night on, my wedding planning was merely a subplot to Sabrina's gestation. Dress shopping was an exercise in masochism. When I stepped out of the dressing room in a sleek A-line silk gown that I loved, my mother barely glanced at me. She was too busy examining Sabrina's profile in the three-way mirror. "Do you think we should look at empire waists, Sabrina?" Mom asked, oblivious to the fact that I was standing on a pedestal wrapped in $3,000 of bridal silk. "By the time August rolls around, you'll be 6 months along. You'll need room to breathe." I just don't want to look like a whale in Emily's photos, Sabrina pouted, resting her hands on her stomach. She looked directly at me through the mirror. You don't mind if I wear a slightly different style than the other bridesmaids, do you, Chloe? I just have to think of the baby's comfort. Wear whatever you want, I said, stepping off the pedestal. I walked back into the dressing room and unzipped myself. I bought the dress online the next day, alone in my apartment. Over the next 6 months, Sabrina's pregnancy was the sun around which my family orbited. She developed severe morning sickness that required my mother to drive to her apartment every morning to make her ginger tea. She had exhaustion spells that meant she couldn't help with a single wedding task, yet she always had the energy to post multi-paragraph updates on Facebook about the miracle of life growing inside her. Oddly, she never seemed to show. At 4 months, she was still wearing her size 0 jeans. At 5 months, she started wearing slightly baggy sweaters, but there was no discernible physical change. When Liam pointed this out to me in the privacy of our kitchen, I brushed it off. Some women carry small, I reasoned, aggressively chopping onions for dinner, and if I question it, I'm the jealous, bitter bride. Let it go. The wedding is in 2 months. We just need to get through it. I was so conditioned to survive my family that I couldn't see the glaring red flags waving right in front of my face. I was tired. I just wanted to marry the man I loved. I didn't care if Sabrina walked down the aisle carrying a neon sign pointing at her uterus. But Sabrina didn't just want a neon sign. She wanted the entire power grid. It was Tuesday, 4 days before the wedding. My dining room table was buried under a landslide of seating charts, vendor contracts, and half-assembled favor boxes. Liam was on the phone arguing with a hotel receptionist who had somehow lost our bridal suite reservation. I was in the middle of writing a check to the florist when my cell phone rang. It was my mother. Mom, if this is about the chicken or fish option for Uncle Dave, it's too late. He's getting the chicken, I said, putting her on speakerphone. A ragged, guttural sob answered me. It was a sound so raw and ugly that the pen slipped from my fingers, leaving a heavy streak of blue ink across the check. Mom? I asked, my heart instantly spiking. Mom, what's wrong? Is Dad okay? It's Sabrina, she wailed, her voice cracking. Oh, Emily, it's gone. The baby is gone. The room went entirely still. Liam stopped talking mid-sentence, lowering his phone. The air in my apartment turned heavy, thick with the sudden, terrible weight of real tragedy. All the resentment, all the anger I had harbored over the last 6 months vanished in a fraction of a second, replaced by a cold, rushing flood of genuine horror and guilt. What happened? I whispered. She started bleeding. She was in so much pain, my mother sobbed. We're at her apartment. She wouldn't let me call an ambulance. She just passed it. Oh, my poor baby girl. I'm coming over, I said, already reaching for my keys. I'll be right there. The drive to Sabrina's apartment was a blur. Liam drove, his jaw tight, his hand resting on my knee. I stared out the window, my mind racing. A miscarriage. 6 months in. That wasn't just a loss. That was a profound medical trauma. I felt sick to my stomach. I had been so petty, so consumed by my own wedding, that I had resented an unborn child. The guilt tasted like copper in my mouth. We ran up the 2 flights of stairs to Sabrina's apartment. The door was unlocked. The living room was cast in dim lighting. All the curtains were drawn. Sabrina was lying on the velvet sofa, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, staring blankly at the ceiling. A mountain of crumpled tissues surrounded her. My mother was sitting on the edge of the coffee table, stroking Sabrina's hair, her own face red and swollen from crying. My father was standing in the corner, looking utterly helpless. Sabrina, I breathed, dropping my purse and kneeling beside the sofa. I am so sorry. She turned her head slowly, looking at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. She reached out a trembling hand. I took it. I wanted to give you a niece, Chloe, she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thread. I tried. I really tried. Don't talk like that, I said, squeezing her hand. This isn't your fault. Are you okay? Do we need to go to the hospital? Mom said you wouldn't go. No hospitals, Sabrina gasped, squeezing her eyes shut. I can't. The doctors, the ultrasound. I can't look at a blank screen, Emily. I just can't. My regular doctor called it in. It's a late-term spontaneous abortion. There's nothing they can do. I just need to rest. It sounded rehearsed, like dialogue from a daytime soap opera, but I shoved that cynical thought down into the darkest corner of my mind. This was grief. Grief makes people weird. For the next 2 hours, Liam and I cleaned her apartment, made tea, and spoke in hushed whispers. But as the evening wore on, the initial shock began to wear off, and the reality of my family's dynamic reasserted itself with staggering force. My mother pulled me into the narrow kitchen. She shut the door behind us, leaning against the refrigerator with a heavy sigh. "Emily, we need to talk about Saturday." I blinked. "Saturday? Mom, the wedding doesn't matter right now. Whatever Sabrina needs." "I'm glad you see it that way," she said, her voice dropping into the authoritative, non-negotiable tone she used whenever she was about to make a completely unreasonable demand. "Because we cannot have a traditional reception." "What do you mean?" "How can we celebrate?" she asked, her eyes welling with fresh tears. "How can we drink champagne and dance to loud music while your sister's heart is shattered? It's completely inappropriate." A cold prickle of dread started at the base of my neck. "Mom, the vendors are paid. We have 150 guests flying in. What are you asking me to do?" "We can still have the ceremony," she reasoned, waving a dismissive hand. "But the reception needs to be respectful. We should cancel the DJ. Maybe just hire a cellist to play some somber, reflective music. No dancing, no bouquet toss that's just rubbing her face in it. And Emily, you cannot wear that bright white dress." I stared at her. "You want me not to wear my wedding dress? To my wedding?" "It's too festive," she hissed, offended by my hesitation. "It sends the wrong message. You have that lovely black cocktail dress you wore to Aunt Sarah's funeral. That would be much more appropriate for the mood." I stopped breathing. I actually stopped breathing. She wanted me to wear a funeral dress to my wedding. She wanted to turn the happiest day of my life into a wake for Sabrina's miscarriage. "No," I said. My mother's face hardened. "Excuse me?" I said, "No, Mom. I am very sorry for Sabrina. Truly, I am. But I am not wearing funeral attire to my own wedding, and I am not canceling the DJ. You are incredibly selfish," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Your sister loses a child, and all you care about is a party." She pushed past me, returning to the living room to resume her post at Sabrina's side. I stood in the kitchen, trembling with a mixture of rage and overwhelming guilt. I needed a moment. I needed air. I walked into Sabrina's small home office to look out the window. Sabrina's laptop was sitting open on the desk. She hadn't put it to sleep. The screensaver was a slideshow of her maternity shoots, her standing in a field, holding a stomach that looked exactly like it did when she was 19. I bumped the desk. The mouse moved, dismissing the screensaver. A web browser was open. I didn't mean to look. I really didn't. But my eyes naturally gravitated toward the bright, bold letters at the top of the active tab. My chart patient portal, Sabrina Miller. I froze. She had said her doctor called it in. Why was she logged into her portal? A sickening, dark curiosity seized me. The kind of curiosity that knows it's about to find a monster in the closet, but opens the door anyway. I leaned in. She was looking at her message inbox. The most recent message was from a Dr. Eris Thorne. Wait, no. Let's make it Dr. Richard Evans. It was dated that morning. I clicked it. Sabrina, per your request, I have attached a generic doctor's note excusing you from work for the next week due to severe gastrointestinal distress. However, I must reiterate what we discussed at your annual physical last Thursday. You are perfectly healthy. You cannot continue to request medical leave for conditions you do not have. Your blood work is completely normal, and as noted, your HCG levels are 0. You are not pregnant, nor have you been at any point in the last year. If you continue to seek diagnoses for fabricated symptoms, I will have to refer you to a psychiatric specialist. Please find the attached note. Dr. Evans. The screen seemed to pulse. The words burned into my retinas. You are not pregnant. HCG levels are 0. Fabricated symptoms. A roaring sound filled my ears. It wasn't the sound of blood rushing. It was the sound of a 28-year-old dam breaking. She lied. She faked a pregnancy at my engagement party to steal the spotlight. She let my mother buy her baby clothes. She let me feel guilty for breathing too loudly. And now, 4 days before my wedding, she faked a dead baby to ensure my reception would be a miserable, silent vigil focused entirely on her tragic, empty womb. My hand moved on its own. I clicked the Download Medical Records tab. I found the clinical notes from Thursday. I found the lab results. Negative, negative, negative. She had gone in for a routine checkup and birth control refill. I selected everything. I clicked print. The small wireless printer on the bookshelf whirred to life. I shoved the warm papers into my purse, closed the browser, and walked out of the office. Liam was waiting by the front door, looking deeply uncomfortable. I walked up to him, grabbed his coat, and looked him dead in the eye. My face must have been completely devoid of blood because he stepped forward, alarmed. "We're leaving," I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded like cracked stone. "Emily, where are you going?" my mother called out from the sofa, her tone sharp and accusatory. "Your sister needs you." I stopped at the door. I looked back at Sabrina. She was peeking out from under the wool blanket, checking to see if I was properly devastated. "I have a wedding to plan," I said, and I walked out. I didn't speak until we were back in our apartment with the deadbolt locked. I walked straight to the dining room table, shoved $300 worth of floral arrangements onto the floor, and slammed the printed medical records down on the wood. "Read it," I told Liam. He took off his coat slowly, sensing the absolute volatility in the air. He picked up the papers. I watched his eyes track back and forth across the page. I watched his brow furrow, then flatten, then tighten into a look of absolute terrifying fury. Liam wasn't a yeller. His anger was quiet, precise, and lethal. He gently set the papers back down. He looked at me. "She faked a miscarriage." "She faked the whole thing," I said, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "From day one. At the engagement party. The morning sickness. The baby clothes Mom bought her. All of it. To ruin my wedding." "Okay," Liam said quietly. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "So, we cancel the wedding." "No!" I shouted, startling both of us. The word tore out of my throat. "No! Absolutely not! If we cancel the wedding, she wins. She gets exactly what she wants, a ruined weekend where everyone sits around her apartment, feeding her soup and pitying her." "Emily, we can't get married in front of these people," Liam argued, gesturing to the papers. "Your parents are enabling a sociopath. If we show this to your mother tomorrow, what do you think will happen?" He was right, and we both knew it. If I took these papers to Brenda in private, she would find a way to spin it. She would say Sabrina was deeply mentally unwell. She would say Sabrina had a hysterical pregnancy and actually believed she was pregnant. She would say I was cruel for hacking into her private medical portal and violating her trust. In 2 weeks, Sabrina would be the victim of a cyberbullying older sister, and my wedding would still be a funeral. The realization hit me with the clarity of a winter morning. You cannot fight a public lie with a private truth. Narcissists thrive in the shadows of family secrets. They rely on the fact that decent people are too embarrassed by the drama to air the dirty laundry. Sabrina banked on my inherent desire to keep the peace. She knew I would swallow my rage to avoid making a scene. "We aren't going to tell my parents," I said, a dangerous, icy calm washing over me. "We aren't going to say a word." Liam looked at me, studying my face. He saw the shift. "What are we going to do?" "She wants a memorial," I said, tapping the medical records. "We are going to give her a memorial. Everyone is going to know exactly what we are mourning." I looked up at him. "Your buddy Dave is doing the AV for the venue, right? The projector screens for the photo montage?" Liam's eyes widened slightly. A slow, dark realization dawned on his face. He looked at the papers, then back at me. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He didn't tell me to take the high road. He just nodded. "I'll scan them into a PDF tonight," Liam said softly. I'll handle Dave. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I played the part of the grieving, compliant sister flawlessly. I answered my mother's frantic, demanding texts with brief, somber replies. Yes, Mom. I told the DJ to keep the volume down. Yes, Mom. I ordered white lilies for the altar instead of the pink peonies. Yes, Mom. Sabrina can sit through the ceremony if standing is too hard. By Saturday morning, the air in the bridal suite of the venue was thick with tension. The smell of expensive hairspray and stale mimosas made me nauseous. My 3 bridesmaids, friends from college who knew the truth but were sworn to secrecy, buzzed around me, forming a protective barrier. The door swung open. My mother entered, supporting Sabrina by the elbow, as if she were an invalid recovering from open-heart surgery. Sabrina was wearing a dress. It wasn't black. It wasn't navy. It was a floor-length silk slip dress in a color the designer probably called champagne. But in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the makeup room, it was undeniably, unapologetically white. Oh, sweetie, my mother cooed, helping Sabrina onto a plush velvet chair. Are you sure you're up for this? You look so pale. Sabrina sighed, a long, tragic sound that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. She placed a hand over her flat stomach. I have to be here for Emily. It's what the baby would have wanted. For our family to be together. One of my bridesmaids, Sarah, actually choked on her mimosa and had to turn away to hide her face. I sat in the makeup chair, letting the artist glue false lashes to my eyelids. I looked at Sabrina in the mirror. She looked beautiful. She looked ethereal. She looked like a martyr ready to be crucified on the altar of my wedding day. You look beautiful, Sabrina, I said, my voice perfectly level. That dress is stunning. Is it new? Sabrina looked surprised by the compliment. She had expected a fight about the color. Oh yes, Mom bought it for me yesterday. I couldn't bear to wear the bridesmaid dress. It was too tight around the waist. It hurt. The cramps. She let her voice trail off, dropping her gaze to the floor. Of course, I said. Comfort is the most important thing today. My mother beamed at me. I'm so proud of you, Emily. You're handling this tragedy with such maturity. Maturity. The word echoed in my head as the photographer arrived to take pre-wedding shots. I posed with my sister. I held her hand. I let her rest her head on my shoulder while she manufactured a single, perfect tear for the camera. I felt nothing. The sister I loved, the sister I had tried to protect my whole life, was dead. The woman standing next to me was just a parasite in a white silk dress. An hour later, I was standing in the vestibule at the back of the venue. The string quartet was playing a slow, mournful cello piece, another of my mother's last-minute demands. The doors to the sanctuary were closed. Liam's best man poked his head out the side door and gave me a subtle thumbs up. The projector screens behind the altar, originally set up to display a rustic, looping monogram of our initials, were primed. The flash drive was plugged in. My father offered me his arm. He looked nervous, sweating slightly in his tuxedo. You look beautiful, Emily, he whispered. I know today isn't what we planned, but thank you for being so accommodating for your sister. It means the world to your mother. Don't worry, Dad, I said, wrapping my hands around my bouquet of white lilies. I looked straight ahead at the heavy oak doors. Today is going to be exactly what this family deserves. The heavy doors swung open. The venue was packed. 150 people turned to look at me, but I didn't look at them. I looked at the front row. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. And right next to her, standing in the spot reserved for the maid of honor, was Sabrina. She was leaning heavily against the pew, holding her stomach, her face cast in a perfect mask of devastating sorrow. I took a breath, stepped onto the aisle runner, and began the long walk to the altar to burn my family to the ground. The walk down the aisle took exactly 62 seconds. I counted every single step. The cello music dragged through the high, vaulted ceilings of the venue, heavy and oppressive. The guests lining the pews didn't look like they were attending a wedding. They looked like they were sitting in a waiting room outside an intensive care unit. Aunts offered me tight, sympathetic smiles. My college friends looked profoundly uncomfortable. The whole room was vibrating with the manufactured grief my sister had demanded. I kept my eyes locked on Liam. He was standing at the altar in a sharp black tuxedo. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man holding a match, waiting for the signal to strike it. When I reached the end of the runner, my father kissed my cheek, stepped back, and took his place next to my mother in the front row. Liam took both of my hands. His palms were warm. His grip was an anchor. The officiant, a kind, older judge who was a friend of Liam's family, cleared his throat. He adjusted his glasses, leaning into the microphone. "We are gathered here today." "Wait," I said. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. The venue acoustics carried my voice perfectly. The judge blinked, startled, and stepped back. I let go of Liam's left hand, turned, and faced the congregation. 150 faces stared back at me in total, bewildered silence. I looked down at the front row. My mother looked confused. Sabrina looked mildly annoyed, as if I had missed my cue in a play she was directing. "I know the energy in this room is strange today," I started, my voice steady, echoing off the stained glass windows. "I know many of you were told by my parents that the reception will be subdued. You were told not to expect dancing. You were told we are in a period of mourning." A murmur rippled through the back rows. Sabrina lowered her head, pressing a tissue to her eyes, playing her part to the absolute bitter end. My mother reached out and rubbed her back. "My sister, Sabrina, announced her pregnancy at my engagement party," I continued. "And 4 days ago, she told us she suffered a late-term miscarriage. That is a tragedy. A devastating, life-altering tragedy. And it is the reason my sister is wearing a white silk dress to my wedding." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence in the room was suffocating. "Liam and I are standing here today to make a commitment," I said, squeezing Liam's hand. "A commitment built on honesty, partnership, and reality. We cannot start our marriage standing in the shadow of a lie. We cannot build our foundation on someone else's delusion." My mother stood up. Her face was flushed, dark red. "Emily, what on earth are you doing? Stop this right now." I ignored her. I looked up toward the balcony in the back of the room and nodded. Dave, Liam's groomsman and the AV tech for the weekend, hit the switch. Behind the altar, the massive twin projector screens, originally meant to display a loop of our engagement photos during the ceremony, dropped down with a mechanical hum. The high-lumen projectors clicked on, flooding the altar with harsh, blinding blue light. There were no pictures of Liam and me. There were 2 massive, high-definition screenshots of a medical portal. The text was magnified by 400%. It was impossible to miss. A collective, sharp intake of breath sucked the oxygen from the room. I picked up the officiant's microphone from the stand. "This is a message from Dr. Richard Evans, sent to Sabrina Miller this past Tuesday morning," I read, my voice ringing out over the PA system, flat and completely devoid of emotion. "I must reiterate what we discussed at your annual physical last Thursday. You are perfectly healthy. You cannot continue to request medical leave for conditions you do not have." "Turn that off!" my mother shrieked, panic finally piercing her vocal cords. She lunged forward, grabbing the wooden railing of the altar. "Emily, have you lost your mind?" I kept reading. "Your blood work is completely normal, and as noted, your HCG levels are 0. You are not pregnant, nor have you been at any point in the last year. If you continue to seek diagnoses for fabricated symptoms, I will have to refer you to a psychiatric specialist." I lowered the microphone. The ringing echo of my voice faded into the rafters. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was structural. It was the sound of an entire family dynamic collapsing in real time. I looked at Sabrina. The delicate, mourning martyr was gone. The tissue fell from her hand. Her mouth was open in a silent, jagged gasp. For the first time in 28 years, I saw my sister completely stripped of her armor. She looked utterly terrified. She looked at the screens, then at the crowd, then at me. That's a lie, Sabrina choked out, her voice trembling, stripped of its usual melodic cadence. She hacked. She made that up. It's Photoshop. She's always been jealous of me. She spun around to face the guests, clutching her flat stomach. She's insane. She faked this to ruin my baby's memory. Nobody moved. Nobody rushed to comfort her. The evidence was literally glowing behind us, 60 square feet of irrefutable clinical proof. The clinic logo was clear. The timestamps were clear. The lab results were projected on the right screen, highlighting the negative pregnancy test from her routine birth control refill. My father was staring at the screen. He took off his glasses. His hands were shaking so violently he nearly dropped them. "Sabrina?" he whispered. It was the smallest sound I had ever heard a grown man make. My mother, however, was a professional enabler. Her brain short-circuited trying to process the data, desperately searching for a way to maintain the narrative. "Emily, how could you be so cruel?" my mother cried, stepping onto the altar, trying to physically block the projectors with her body. "She's sick. She had a hysterical pregnancy." Her mind tricked her body into... "Mom," I interrupted, reaching into the pocket of my dress. I pulled out the physical stack of medical records I had printed from Sabrina's office. I dropped them on the floor at her feet. "Read the clinical notes." She wasn't confused. She asked the doctor for a fake gastrointestinal note to get out of work. She bought baby clothes for a child she knew didn't exist. She let you cry over a dead baby that was never conceived. My mother looked down at the papers. She didn't pick them up. The delusion finally broke. She turned slowly to look at her golden child. Sabrina was backing away down the side aisle. Her face was contorted into an ugly, desperate sneer. "You're a bitch, Emily," Sabrina screamed, her voice cracking, echoing terribly in the quiet church. "You ruined everything. You always ruin everything." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and ran out the side door, the white silk of her dress catching the harsh projector light as she fled. My mother collapsed into the front pew, burying her face in her hands. Deep, heaving, horrible sobs racked her shoulders. This time, her tears were real. My father just stood there, staring at the floor where the medical records lay scattered. I handed the microphone back to the bewildered officiant. I looked out at the guests. "The ceremony's canceled," I said clearly. "The bar at the reception hall will open in 15 minutes. It's an open tab. Eat the food. Drink the champagne. Have a wonderful weekend. But Liam and I are going home." Liam put his arm around my waist. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He simply turned me away from the altar, away from the glowing blue screens, and away from the wreckage of my family. We walked back down the aisle together. The cello player had packed up his instrument and left 3 minutes ago. The only sound was the rustle of my dress and the heavy thud of the venue doors closing behind us. We stepped out into the bright, sharp afternoon sun. The air felt incredibly light. Liam unlocked the doors to our rented getaway car. I hiked up the skirt of my wedding dress and climbed into the passenger seat. Liam got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. We drove for 10 minutes in total silence. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, hollow exhaustion. But beneath the exhaustion, something else was taking root. Peace. A vast, quiet, unshakable peace. Liam reached over and took my hand. "There's a courthouse in the city," he said quietly, keeping his eyes on the road. "Opens at 8 a.m. on Monday. I know a judge. We can be in and out in 20 minutes. I looked at him. The man who saw the sinkhole and helped me build a bridge right over it. "Only if we get pancakes after," I said. A small, genuine smile cracked across his face. "Deal." We didn't go back to the venue. We didn't answer our phones. By Sunday morning, I had 74 missed calls from my parents and dozens of frantic texts from relatives. I deleted them all. I blocked my mother, my father, and my sister. I haven't spoken to them in 3 years. I don't know what happened at the reception hall that day, and I don't care. I don't know how my parents rationalized Sabrina's lie to the extended family. It is no longer my problem to solve. I am no longer the bigger person. I am just a person living a quiet, boring, wonderfully happy life with my husband. Blood might be thicker than water, but toxic waste is thicker than both. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to stop trying to clean it up, walk away, and let them drown in it. Family loyalty shouldn't be a life sentence, especially when it costs you your sanity. Emily finally stopped playing by the rules of a rigged game, choosing the brutal truth over a lifetime of toxic manipulation. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and cut off toxic family members to protect your peace? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more grounded, real-life drama. Your support means everything.